My name is Rachel Rofe. I created this show because I wanted to help you see that if you have a choice, you can choose a better life. If you're listening to this podcast, you're in a pretty fortunate position. You have free will, ability to connect to the internet, and access to all kinds of new education. This podcast is meant to help you make the most of your good fortune. We talk with all kinds of people here from all walks of life because I want you to see that no matter what your situation, there's always a way to create a life that you're proud of. Hello everyone! Today we're here with Kit Murray Maloney. Kit founded Actually as an alternative to mainstream adult entertainment sites. Following her master's in gender and social policy studies from the London School of Economics, she committed to channeling her passion for gender equality into a celebration of women's sexual pleasure. With the aid of angel investors, she hatched Actually in 2014 as an initiative to promote creative content celebrating female sexual pleasure. I met Kit probably about a year ago. We were in the same mastermind together, and she is just one of my favorite people on the planet. She's such an amazing woman, and she has such a huge just purpose and gift to give to the world. And I know even just reading her bio, you might be like, oh, this is going to be an interesting show, and I think it will be. Kit just has so much to share about just everything and a lot about female pleasure and how important it is. And I think we're just going to cover such spectacular stuff on this show. So Kit, thank you so much for being here. I've been so excited about talking with you all day.
Me too, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled, and I have loved knowing you, and I can't believe we've only known each other for a year because you're such an important person to me. So thank you.
I know, right? I was like a year. Like it felt weird to even say. It doesn't feel like that.
Exactly.
The intention behind A Better Life is to show people that if they have a choice, they can choose a better life. So can you take a minute in that spirit to share with us some of the things that you're most proud of in your life?
This is one of my favorite questions of yours on this brilliant podcast. I am incredibly proud of my relationships with my family and my friends. I am constantly in gratitude for being surrounded by unbelievable people. My parents are unwavering supporters of me and are just so wonderful, and I feel that it's a real privilege and honor to have such a tight connection to them. And I feel the same about my older brother. And I also have this amazing group of women that I grew up with, and they're incredibly important to me. And I feel it's brag-worthy to have friendships that can last decades after decades. But I also think it's something I'm really proud of is being open to fostering new relationships in conjunction with the old. And you're a great example of that. And the mastermind that we have been a part of is another great example of that, in that it's sometimes easy to think that we already have a certain support group and that that is finite. And I'm really thankful that I've been able to see the joy and growth in continuing to meet and engage with people, because there's just such amazing community out there. Another thing is that I feel like I'm very proud of myself for the moments in my life where I've really trusted my gut, even when it's been saying some pretty crazy things, like start this company that celebrates women's sexual pleasure through adult entertainment, or what you really want to do is drive across the country and be pretty nomadic for 6 or 7 months. And these are things that I've done in the relative recent past that have rewarded me in such magnitude that it's even hard to describe. But primarily what I'm most proud of is what we're doing with Actually, and that we're about to launch and how we're launching. And I think that we will have quite an impact on the world and women, and that is definitely aligned with my purpose. So it's a very exciting time.
Yes, everything you're saying, I'm just nodding my head. I know how hard you've worked at just following your intuition wherever it takes you, including these things that are just like they sound crazy to other people.
Yes, that is fair.
But it's great. I love it. And I'd love if you could let us know about what drove you to create the company that you're creating, because I know you have a really fascinating backstory about that.
I laugh because I definitely have a short, medium, and long-term answer for this. But In short, we started actually to be a space that is fun and playful and that is a genuine celebration of female sexual pleasure. And that is me really focusing on what I do want to see in the world. And I spent my late teens and much of my 20s really focusing on what we didn't want to see in the world. And so I was immersed in discussions and leading groups that were trying to best tackle and grapple the problems with sexual violence. And that work was incredibly rewarding. And I think that we made some great progress. And that is what really led me to get my master's in gender and social policy. But when I was in London in my master's, which I absolutely loved, I was still very much focused around issues of violence. And it was incredibly daunting, and I found myself needing to step away from the work. I wasn't able to stay engaged and then also present and alive and joyful, and that was who I am. I'm incredibly inspired by the people who can take on these issues and also maintain the energy and the vitality to really continue to have the impact. For me, I needed to rethink and to step away and to understand how I could access the discussion in a way that was going to be truly aligned and enlivening for me. And so I spent a couple of years doing various things, very different, very outside of anything gender related. And I had a moment about 2.5 years ago now where I thought, I got to get back to doing something about gender equity. I've got to be doing something to better women's position in the world. I did sort of that thing, which I think a lot of us do, is that I went back to thinking about how I had been involved before. I reached out to people I had worked with in the past and was thinking about maybe I could be on some boards of nonprofits that I really admire and maybe write some white papers in my side time whilst doing my other job. And then I had this moment of realization that as I was getting older, I was getting to know myself that much better. I couldn't access the conversations and the work around ending violence in a full-time or even in a part-time way. I needed to feel like I was leading something that was really important but different. And I had this moment where I was reading about how there were women, primarily in Europe and Australia and Canada, who were getting behind the camera and making really sexually stimulating, awesome videos that were geared to women and also a celebration of women's sexual pleasure. And I thought, okay, that's what I want to be a part of. And so it's a long way of me saying that I sort of went from really being focusing on what we don't want to really be focusing on what we do want. From that mindset is how O actually has been created. So it's a real focus on pleasure and fun and all of the great things that come from female sexual pleasure.
One thing that I've been curious about that I don't think that we ever talked about was at the time when you were first beginning to just talk about all the sexual violence that you didn't want, I'm sure you had a lot of friends who were in that same, like you were kind of simpatico with, they were all about the same thing. And so when you decided to change your direction and instead go on what we do want, I'm curious how they responded, because I could see where people might not like that.
Yeah, really great question. And I had a lot of nervousness around that and a lot of thankfulness that for the most part, people have just been so supportive and so intrigued. And so I think that that was probably even a better way of the early stages of me talking about what is now O actually, was this knowingness of my previous self and how I was acting and reacting to things, and then thinking, well, Kit's gonna go do this now? Like, this is really intriguing and I'm interested to learn more. And that was the overwhelming reaction from friends and family and people within the space that I had worked with in the past. Hopefully, to know me is to know that my intention is very good and that I have thought things through at least a little bit before I go forward with them. People were really intrigued, really sort of saying, like, we didn't see this coming necessarily, but therefore tell us more. So I was really thankful for that being the overwhelming reaction.
Well, I think that speaks to who you are as a person, because if you have all these friends that are bonding over what you don't want, it's more of a like negative kind of vibration, and then to go into such a completely different vibration and still be received, I think really speaks a lot to who you are. Because I could see where people be like, no, people are getting sex trafficked and all this stuff where, how is something focusing on what you want, how is that going to help them?
I had those conversations sort of back and forth with myself, to tell you the truth. And I finally realized that it was worth it to me to get engaged in this discussion, and it's doubtful that we'll do this perfectly. And I get asked a lot, what if you promote a film and then find out that it wasn't as much about pleasure as you had assumed it to be? That's an awful worst case scenario for us. However, it's not enough to deter me from trying to really add something wonderful to this space. I think that we can always come up for so many reasons not to do something and to be fearful of doing it. And this is me saying, let's at least give it a shot. Let's open up the conversation and let's release the taboo around female self-pleasure and really open that door so that we can celebrate female orgasms in a bigger, more meaningful way.
And why is that important to you?
Well, for many reasons. Women have a voice, and an equal voice in this world has been a passion of mine since I was really a little girl, always trying to make the argument for why I should be allowed to do something because my brother could, and everything from bedtimes to sports to schools. And I had incredibly supportive feminist parents, so that was rarely an issue. But I almost feel like I was born with that drive to make sure that women were treated fairly and justly in the world. And when I saw the gravitude of the injustice around sexual violence, particularly sexual violence on college campuses, it really struck a chord in me that I knew I wanted to be involved in that discussion at that time in my life. And several years have passed. I feel like this is the moment for me to say, well, this is so important in a somewhat roundabout way. And I know that some people might think that this is naive. I actually think that we can better the world through celebrating pleasure and have an impact against violence by actually celebrating pleasure. That is incredibly important to me, to see women being able to thrive and grow. And when women are attuned to their bodies and receiving pleasure, the world is a better place. Women are happier and engaged and fulfilled and doing better work in the world. So it's one way of adding that powerful woman into the world, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great point. When women are feeling better, they're going to show up better for everybody around them. The whole, actually, and your pleasure pledge, I want to ask you that. I think there's just so much there, and I think that you're just such a change maker, and this is so innovative to so many people. It's just hard to not ask a whole bunch of questions about that. Maybe we'll have you here for a couple of times. So tell us about the pleasure pledge.
So the pleasure pledge, I'm so excited about, Rachel. The pleasure pledge is us asking women to make a commitment to their pleasure with a focus on their sexual pleasure for each day in February. So it's the first time that we're launching it. It'll run from February 1st through to February 28th. And the pledge is to prioritize your orgasms on a daily basis. And of course, as a good CEO and founder would do, I've tested this out to make sure that it's as wonderful as we're saying it is. And it's fantastic. It really has an impact on your life to see what happens when you make a commitment to yourself in this way and hold yourself accountable to it. So making the time and making it fun and joyful and playful and prioritizing yourself. What's interesting is that in some ways it sounds so fun, it sounds easy, and then in some ways it sounds rather daunting. And it's a bit of a balance, and it takes a bit of a groove, but it's quite life-changing to incorporate orgasms into an assumption of your daily routine, and really has an amazing effect. And we found in testing this with other women to have that connection to your body in a deeper way, and the impact with relationships and stress levels decreasing and sleeping better, all of these good things that we want to have. How cool is it that it can come in the form of an orgasm? That is the crux of the pleasure pledge. We also want to be really open in our conversing with actually community around the truth that, maybe sometimes you're genuinely not in the mood. And that's why we've decided to really hone in on this being a pledge and promise to yourself without being any sort of challenge. There's no way of failing the pleasure pledge. This is about being fun, but also being a little bit more, committed to yourself than you might be otherwise. However, if there are days that it's not really feeling right, then we're asking women to really think about what they do need for that time, whether that's a walk or some delicious chocolate or just to go and find a nice, tidy area of the house to be alone and sit and be contemplative, and that is prioritized as well.
So just making a conscious commitment to some kind of pleasure every day.
Exactly. Because it's us, with, the focus being sexual pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. So you said that it's been helping people with stress levels when you were testing it, and I know some other people tested it too. So stress level is a big one, and getting enough sleep. And what other benefits did people report?
Some really fun ones. So yeah, orgasms are great stress release. Cortisol is flushed out of you in a really wonderful way, and stress is something that keeps us up at night and all the rest of it. So there's just such a knock-on effect. Some fun other anecdotal treats from testing it with other great women that we know, a connection to your partner. And that was sort of fun and almost surprising thing to see. Partners would almost intuitively pick up on that their female partners were more sexually satisfied, and it made them more sexually desirable. So people started having more moments of self-pleasure and then experiencing more moments of sexual pleasure with their partners, which seemed like quite a great testament to the pleasure pledge as well. In addition, that real, that permission. And I think that oftentimes women are seeking that permission from outside, but then to be giving it to yourself, well, I'm part of this pledge, so this isn't selfish, or this isn't something I can say I don't have time for, or something else is more important. And getting into that mindset also has such a knock-on effect, which I think is really valuable.
So I'm just thinking about, for women who are listening, and I know men listen to this too, so I'll ask a question about that next. But for the women who are listening, this might be such a foreign concept for them. What advice would you give for them to actually make it a priority?
We are having a private Facebook group that will be monitored so that it's super fun and super safe, and people can ask questions and get feedback on how things are going for each member of the Facebook community for the Pleasure Pledge. So that's one area of resource. The other thing is that I think what I've been inspired by, you can use us as an excuse to talk to your friends in potentially a more open way than you might otherwise. So I would encourage women to say, did you see this thing that I read about somewhere, saw it on Facebook, or was reading about her Marie Claire? Did you hear about this? And what do you think? Often that will open up a discussion that then allows for support and allows for sort of the attitude of, well, this sort of sounds crazy, but it also sounds fun, and I'll do it if I can talk openly with you about it. And it can really help with creating deeper connections with your female friends. I would encourage women to think about that, and I would encourage them to give it a try. It's one of these fun things that doesn't really have any negative to it. So I can see how it would definitely push some of us out of the comfort zone. It definitely took me a while to get into the groove with it, but once it's part of the daily routine, it's a really good thing.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, a couple of years ago, I was in Mama Gina's. Have you heard of Mama Gina?
Yes.
Yeah, so she has her whole School of the Womanly Arts, and she's all for, this is for people listening, but so she's all about pleasure. And I remember there were people in the audience that were just so resistant to pleasure. And they had just all these reasons why they did not want it. But I love what you're saying, that there really is. I don't think of any negatives either, huh?
Right? That's one way to look at it. Trust into yourself and into your own body, and it's really outside of your comfort zone. Maybe ask why and see what the step might need to be taken in this moment that allows you some pleasure that does really feel comfortable. So maybe that's really, buying a nice bouquet of flowers, or writing yourself a thank you note. These things that can feel a little bit less edgy as a way to tap into that focus on giving yourself some time and some appreciation and pleasure.
Yeah, I'm thinking it would probably be cool too for before people start the pleasure pledge. Like I have a book, it's 5-minute morning boosters, and at the beginning of it, I tell them to try it for 30 days. And so at the beginning, I have them rate different things, like their different areas of their life on a 1 to 10, and then they rate it again at the end of 30 days. So I'd be so curious if you did that with your pleasure pledge, like relationships, like what.
Yeah.
You should totally consider doing that.
I would love that. Yeah.
I bet there will be some tangible improvements for people.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the men who are listening, how would you want to relate to them? I guess where I'm coming from is, how can men either help, or do you feel like women need to take responsibility for themselves, or is it both of those things? Or like, what message do you have for the dudes listening?
The dudes listening. Kit says. Focus on female sexual pleasure. It'll be rewarding to you as well, I promise. So we do get asked often, well, is this company only for women? And I say, no, our site is about women's sexual pleasure. Hopefully that's not only for women. And the men that I've talked to over the years, everyone from great friends, husbands, to family members and business advisors, have just been so wonderful and so supportive. Men can be, when we allow them to be, our biggest champions. And so I think for the pledge, it's also another really fun opportunity to say if you do have a male partner, to say, I'm doing this and I'm taking this on myself. I understand you aren't making a pledge to my sexual pleasure on a daily basis, but I also hope that this can be something that we can have a lot of fun together with. And so it very much can, and I would hope often does, include men.
Yeah, and something that maybe I could have asked before, but it's now popping in my head is, for you, why is sexual pleasure important to you versus, let's say, the kind of pleasure with like buying the bouquet of flowers that you mentioned?
It is, it's called self-love for a reason, right? It's like the ultimate expression of self-love. And I think that it has a really powerful impact on your body and your relationship to your body. And I do also think it has, when women are really connected to their bodies, we can't deny the importance of the sexuality within that. And so this is taking that a little bit further than simply focusing on doing nice things for yourself. It's focusing on doing something really nice for this part of ourselves that we often, as women, either don't believe is as important as other areas of our life, or aren't necessarily encouraged to explore as much as, if it was a pledge to buy flowers every day, I don't think it would be that edgy, and it would be super fun. And I love flowers. I'm surrounded by them right now. Thank goodness. They're beautiful and wonderful and make me happy. But this is a way to be even that much more committed and connected to yourself. And I think that then helps us be more engaged in presenting how we want to be touched and communicated with and engaged with. And so it presents us as women in a more powerful space with others, and sort of in a more broadening way in the world. So,
have you noticed a correlation between women's self-pleasure and their intuition?
Only anecdotally.
Yeah.
but hopefully someday I'll be able to have some hard data to that. Because I definitely believe in it.
I guess it would make sense, right? Like if they're more connected with their body, then they can listen to their gut feels more often. They can listen to, because it's so easy to override what feels right because, logic.
Right. We tell ourselves it's more important to, go to the gym and run on a treadmill for an hour than it is to go and make yourself a bath and have an orgasm. That sounds more fun. It's easy to have that logic and that mind override us, but it's really wonderful and beautiful to have the moments when you choose something else.
Do you get nervous, when you're telling investors about your company? Does it feel taboo still to you, or are you ingrained in it now?
a bit of both. I mean, when you first said that, I thought, of course I get nervous all the time. And then I thought, well, I really have come so far in the past couple of years in how I present the company and present the vision, and thankful for those who gave me the encouragement to be able to sit in it with so much more confidence than I had just a couple of years ago. And when this was first just an idea and sort of a what if I were able to do a company like this type of discussions. But I had this moment a couple of years. It was July of 2013. I remember it because I had this realization that I was going to events or social gatherings and people would, as per normal, ask me what I do for a living. And at the time I had two companies. I had one that was called Collaboratory, which was primarily a co-working space for supporting other female entrepreneurs. And that was such a wonderful, fun thing to be a part of, but also way less edgy than Actually. And so I'd find myself often leading the answer of what do I do with talking about my passion to support other female entrepreneurs, and would have great conversations with that. And then try to suss out if it was going to be quote unquote okay to mention Actually. I had this realization now, I guess a year and a half ago or so, that was so unfair. It was unfair to me. It was unfair to the person I was talking to. It was unfair to the vision of Actually, and that Actually is something I believe deeply in. And why would I ever try to skirt away from telling the world about it? And so my commitment to myself, and I think that this probably applies hopefully to people who are listening in a much more general way, that when you're proud of something, talk about it and don't assume that people aren't going to get it, because by doing that, you're not even giving the opportunity to engage with you on it. And I have had some of my most interesting conversations and gotten some of my most amazing connections from responding totally truthfully and forthrightly about what is Actually to just the people that I think, oh my gosh, please don't ask me what I do for a living. Please don't ask me what I do for a living, because I'm at some fancy wedding, or I'm talking to a gentleman at a political fundraiser who's in his 80s, and I'm just thinking, oh no, I don't know if I want to answer. And then those can be the most exciting moments. And if it's not, if somebody doesn't want to talk to me about it, then I'm completely respectful of that, and we move on, and there are plenty of other things to discuss. But that was a really big game changer for me, and it had this great upward spiraling effect of giving me more confidence, which then made me less nervous, which then continued that upward cycle and being able to talk really openly. And I think it's like anything else, when you're sort of presented with the energy of comfort, people are then able to respond in that way. When I was nervous, there was that nervous energy. And so, again, that wasn't really fair to whomever I was speaking with.
That's a great point. The other thing I was curious about was, you said in the beginning about how you had a lot of doubt about bringing it up to friends and family, and how did you get past some of that doubt, just get your message out there?
Slowly, I would say. I was first reading about the type of work that is being done that then motivated Actually. Late one night, I was at the office, and I was like, there's something here that I want to do. And I started doing more research online and checking out the numbers and being really amazed and encouraged and delighted and sort of confused that I didn't know about how many women are accessing adult content online already, and thinking, wow, this is something I'm not talking with my female friends about. And I didn't even know I wasn't talking to them about it. My brother is a wonderful supporter of mine, gives me abundant counsel, and has heard lots of my sometimes out there ideas over the years. And I wrote him this email, and it was, actually I texted him and I said, what's your personal email address? And he was like, well, here it is, but also you could just call me now, we're texting each other. And I was like, no, I have this idea that I'm not even sure I'm going to email you about. but I just wanted to think maybe I would. And so it was full of I don't know if this is too weird, if this is too much, blah, blah, blah. But I said that out to him. He was incredibly supportive. He was like, do it. I think it's brilliant. The next day I talked to my best friend about it. She was full of insightful and supportive questions. And we had this great lunch. And from there, I sort of picked very purposefully, a small handful of people that I didn't necessarily know would be supportive of the concept, but I knew would be supportive of me. So that they were safe people to introduce the vision to. And that built up one by one in conversations, and then gave me the confidence, and the passion was also spiraling upward as these conversations were happening for me, as I was realizing that this is really what I wanted to do. And so that made it more helpful to continue to connect with others.
Yeah, and that's another thing I think would probably be really beneficial to talk about for a second, because you mentioned the things that you're proud of about how you have some really great friendships in your life from people that you've been friends with for decades upon decades, but then also making your new friends. And now you're saying about how having safe people, those friendships that you've cultivated, being able to talk with them and kind of have like a springboard with which to bounce from is so helpful. And,
that's amazing.
Yeah, and you're so masterful at cultivating relationships. And I wonder if you have any tips on how to do that.
Well, thank you for the compliment, Rachel. I do love people. And so I love connecting, and I love sharing stories, and I love trying to be helpful. Coming from that place, I would hope, is something that helps me further connect. I do also really find incredible value in the going deep. And I know you and I have talked about this over the past year a lot, that it's so scary and yet so powerful to connect with people outside of the normal questions and the normal conversations, and to really understand what motivates people and what makes them happy and brings them joy and what they're really struggling with. Oftentimes we can go days, weeks, months without having conversations that allow us to tap into something that is deep and true and real for one another. And yet those conversations, as scary as they are, lead to some of the deepest connections that I think we can have. And so I've been trying to be more mindful of pushing myself to be open, and then also really receiving to other people's depth.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. When you're able to really bear what's really important to yourself, it does definitely create more of a connection than how's the weather over where you're from.
Right?
Yes.
But it's easy to operate in that weather sphere for a long time. So
It is. There's a marketing event that happens once a year, and I've been asked probably about 50 times this last month if I'm going to be going. And I'm just thinking about all the conversations are going to be either with new people, where are you coming from?
Exactly.
How's the weather over there?
How was your flight?
Oh gosh, yeah.
And they're nice questions. They're coming from a good place. People are trying to be.
Absolutely. I guess I'm just, just so detest the small talk. I don't think I can do it.
Yeah, exactly. We've been broken out of the small talk paradigm. The small talk is not. It's polite, and it gets us through to some degree, but it's also not terribly memorable. And I think that's what I found as well. And when I'm able to be vulnerable or laugh at myself or be open, I mean, it's totally ironic in some ways that I'm saying this, because as you know more than others, I have an incredibly hard time doing this. So it doesn't come easy to me, but I have seen the rewards be so obvious that it's a continual commitment to me to try to go deeper and be vulnerable and really open and let people see who I really am. Then we have this connection that then lasts and then is powerful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And for some reason, I'm just feeling called to mention to people how one of the things that you and I do is the venting. We just are going through rough times or something, and we just need to have someone hear it. And so often it's you don't want to bring negative energy or blah blah blah.
Right, letting it out to you, Rachel, is so powerful, and you are a venting master, and it's so inspiring.
It's probably not a good thing, right?
No, it's a brilliant thing, because whenever I listen or read any of your vets, I can actually feel it being released from you. It's given me permission to do the same, and then to really truly let it go with the vent. It's not a vent to hang on. It's a vent to be like, okay, I just got to get this out and then move on.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you're amazing at it too. Even right before we started talking, you're let me get this out of my space.
I don't want to bring this in.
One thing that I've been playing with lately is having a thought and then seeing it in front of me and then like putting it into some kind of shape or something, seeing it in front of me and then exploding it. I actually learned this from this intuitive, like I'm going to a school actually for deepening your intuition. And that was the exercise. And it's so helpful. I woke up this morning and I just felt like I had some dreams that made me feel kind of like cranky, and I was just like, oh, I can very easily see this morning not going well. And so I just took all those, like that crankiness, and I put it into shapes and colors and just exploded it. And I was amazed by how easily they just dissipated.
That is amazing, and I cannot wait to start doing that.
Seriously, let me know how it goes for you.
I will. Really I absolutely will.
Maybe you've already, I might already know your answer to this, but what is a specific action step that you take on a daily basis to make your life better?
I do have daily orgasms. I also meditate, and those are probably the two things that have bettered my life in incorporating them into routine in the biggest ways. I always feel better. I also, if I get out of the habit of either one, I almost instantly feel worse. So I had a friend say to me the other day that they weren't sure if their meditation practice was really doing anything. I'm very understanding of that because I've had those feelings before, and it's like, really, this is you add up this time, this is a lot of time, maybe I could be doing something else. And my invitation to him was, well, then just stop meditating, see how you feel. And he didn't want to. I was like, well, there's an answer in that because there's a knowingness that this is making you feel better. But also, I've done that myself. Like, if I stop meditating or if I stop prioritizing orgasms, then I don't feel as good. And that's my answer into how valuable the time is. Yeah, those are my two biggies.
Yeah, those are great answers. What for you, in your experience, is something that most people don't share about improving yourself? Maybe it's not a sexy kind of thing, or it just doesn't paint this pretty rainbow kind of picture.
I think that particularly in the world of entrepreneurs and people who are working remotely, that we don't talk often enough about the importance of leaving your house and doing so early in the morning. And this is a big one for me personally because I am very good at convincing myself that these are things that I don't need to do, but they are so important. And that does tap into the importance of routine, which doesn't necessarily sound very sexy, but I at least crave routine in a much more serious way than I admit to myself sometimes. But really the routine of getting up in the morning and doing whatever sort of morning ritual you do, but having that include putting on some real clothes and not pajamas and getting outside of the house, even if it's just for 10 minutes, is so valuable and somehow not talked about as much. And I guess what I mean to say is that it's not talked about as much as how, how difficult something that seems so simple like that is, and two, how easy it is to then not incorporate it and get pretty down and isolated. So I welcome some more openness around those type of conversations.
That's a great point. And the importance of routine, I actually have a list of potential podcast topics, and that is one of my next ones, I think, is just that power of routine is so helpful. And I remember Tim Ferriss was talking about how he had studied a bunch of routines of some of the world's most prolific creators. Have you heard this? Do you know where I'm going already?
I think so. I mean, I'm a huge Tim Ferriss fan as well, and he's like the guru of routines.
Yeah,
but I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's totally fine. So, yeah, he said that when people have routines, it just takes out questions. I don't remember if I talked about this on another podcast too, I may have, but like when you take out the questions because you have so many things automated, you have more energy to put into your creative endeavors and you're able to just make more.
Absolutely, absolutely. You don't use that time wondering if today you're going to do this and da-da-da-da-da. That time is negated. You're just already in doing mode.
I remember he was talking about this guy, Dean Jackson, I think maybe, and that guy actually wears the same clothes every single day. And whenever he travels anywhere, he has his assistant go and just mail, I think it's like a black shirt and khaki pants or something, and it's it. And he said his life, like once he made that decision, I mean, for me that doesn't feel fun, but for him, he's like, it gives him so much more energy for other things.
I remember reading or listening about that from him and thinking that would free up so much time. I do think that there is a level, you mentioned, that's important of that, if fashion is important to how you feel, then that might not be the solution. But the overriding principle of that is so powerful, just to get rid of all the decisions that don't absolutely need to be made.
Absolutely. So what would you say to somebody who might be listening now and feel like they're struggling, or they feel like they're struggling and trapped by their circumstances? What advice would you give to them?
Well, I love this question, and I love that this is your whole intention around this podcast. It's both super simple and then super complex, which is, I think, to really believe in yourself, to trust that you know what's best for yourself. That can be really hard, and has been really hard for me at times when maybe I've been in a relationship that I know I need to end, but everybody around me thinks it's wonderful, and I don't necessarily know how to do it if it doesn't seem like it's quote unquote the right thing or the thing that other people would do. And the things in my life that have caused the most upward momentum have been the times where I've been honest with myself, and honest with myself that I can have a life that yields joy for me. And sometimes it hasn't felt like that. And I've definitely had my dark days. I also have come from a lot of privilege. So I want to be very clear with listeners that I appreciate and am aware of that. But regardless of life circumstances, we can all get really hard on ourselves and really down, and it can get foggy and the not knowingness of if it's going to be okay and what really is the way out. At least the way out for me was to be more honest with myself and with the people that I really trusted and knew loved me, and then get clear that I could live a life that was better and thriving, and that I needed to go for it.
Great advice. Thank you. I love that. One of the things I really want everyone listening to know is that none of us have it all figured out just yet. And we're all humans with everyday struggles. So I'd love to know for you, what's something that you're currently working through in your life, and how are you getting through it?
Well, it goes back to actually my previous answer. That's my journey, is to continue to remember that it's my life. I need to do the things in it that feel aligned, and trust that if that's not what other people around me think I quote unquote should be doing, that's okay, and I respect that opinion. But I need to really focus on where I think things need to be headed. And I can acknowledge that, and I can say that on this podcast to thousands of people. And I will also admit that that is also a huge struggle for me, to not be so concerned about not necessarily what other people are thinking, but how my decision to. One example of this is that I move a lot. I love traveling. I love creating communities in places and meeting new people. And what that means is that looking back over the last 15, 20 years, I have moved almost every 2 to 3 years. And that's given me a lot of joy, and I've met some amazing people. But I've also hurt people by leaving the cities, and that weighs on me a lot. And yet it's just balancing that knowingness that I'm hurting some people with the also knowingness that this is what I need to be doing. I guess it's self-compassion is probably what I'm in a constant struggle with. Hope that makes some sense.
That makes total sense, and thank you for being so open and honest.
Well, I just said you had to be open and honest. I was like, damn.
I hate it when that happens. Well, cool. I think this has been great. We've covered so much ground and so many different things, but I think that people listening are going to feel just really inspired by you, and I just love so much that you bring such a unique but important cause, and just acknowledge that it takes a lot of courage and bravery to do what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you so much for what you do. And can you let people know where they can go to learn more about Actually, and also the Pleasure Pledge, and just anywhere else that you'd like to send people? Cool.
Yes. So regardless of when you're listening to this, you can go on to ohactually.com, and there you can see our beta site. You can also sign up for the Pleasure Pledge. And once you sign up, you'll be invited to the Facebook group. And that's pretty much as straightforward as it gets. ohactually.com, Pleasure Pledge. You can reach out to us from ohactually as well. And I'm on Twitter at Kit Maloney. So if you need anything from me or have any questions, just ask me on Twitter.
Well, thank you again very much for being here.
Thank you, Rachel. This is so much fun.
Thank you so much for listening to A Better Life. You can find all show notes for this episode at rachelrofay.com. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe so you can automatically get access to all new shows. Let's also connect. Just go onto Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram /RachelRofay, and we can talk there. The opinions of all guests here are their own, and I'm not necessarily endorsing any of them. I do want to give you